You don't know how glad I am to see you. You did the right thing. Akande was a monster. Her death was much too... And you lunatic, you broke into the board's own fortress just to rescue one doddering old man. You are absolutely out of your mind, and I can't begin to thank you enough. Ah, all in it. You've broken the board's stranglehold on this colony, and you saved... You and I are going to have to work harder than ever to save Halcyon. I'm afraid the situation is far... 2 years ago, we're in serious trouble, my friend. Yes, certainly. I'll help however I can. I could use your help. You're the only ally I've got. And not just because you've murdered every potential leader in Halcyon.
Oh my god.
I doubt I could change your mind even... When I revived you, I thought we were going to save this colony all by ourselves. But I was wrong. We can't save Halcyon on our own. We are not a colony anymore. Our last connection to Earth has been severed.
The OSI teaches that everything in the universe happens according to the grand plan. But the stranger that arrived in Halcyon was an unplanned variable. From the moment he landed in Emerald Vale, his actions altered the course of history. The events on Tartarus brought about the end of the board's authority. But the board's mistakes would haunt the colony for decades to come. The damage they left behind would require the work of a generation to repair. Dr. Phineas Wells began reviving a handful of the Hope's colonists. Engineers, scientists, technicians, and intellectuals. They were among the brightest minds the Earth had ever sent out into the stars. The Hope scientists and engineers woke up in a colony descending headlong into total collapse. With no way to return to Earth, they had no choice but to band together and devote themselves to the cause of saving Halcyon. The people of Halcyon were nothing if not hardy. In the absence of the board's authority, many of the colony's settlements banded together with a single purpose in mind: survival. Life was especially hard in the years to come. Some towns dissolved by attrition and starvation, but most of them found a way to carry on. In the years to come, Halcyon was forced to reckon with its newfound freedom. The board was gone, and for better or worse, the colony was responsible for its own destiny. Left leaderless, the people of Stellar Bay and Amber Heights were slowly but inevitably picked apart by the wildlife of Monarch. Left unchecked, the war on Monarch consumed both MSI and the Iconoclasts. And when the sulfur clouds settled, only stragglers from both factions remained. Some found their way to Sublight, some to Terra 2, and some lived their final years fighting for food in the wilderness. In the end, only the beasts remained. Without Lilia Hagen, Sublight Salvage fell apart. The company fractured, evolving into a series of unregulated criminal gangs, fences, and smugglers. Their facade of legitimacy quickly faded. In time, the Sublight family was forgotten. Over the years, the ruins of Edgewater caused irreversible environmental damage to the landscape of Emerald Vale, owing largely to the presence of toxic compounds in the town's building materials. As for Edgewater's former workers, their remains provided a source of nourishment for the region's fauna, leading to an explosion in the sprat population. The loss of Junlei Tennyson hit the Groundbreaker hard, and even threatened to undercut the ship's independence. Taking up the example of their fallen captain, citizens banded together and rallied anew for the Groundbreaker's autonomy. Junlei was remembered as a folk hero, the spark that ignited a flame, heralding a new age of proud defiance against anyone who would challenge the groundbreakers' sovereignty. The rediscovery of the Hope and the abandonment of the lifetime employment program forced Byzantium to come to terms with some uncomfortable realities about the state of Halcyon. While Byzantines were reluctant to surrender the luxuries they'd grown accustomed to, the board's diminished authority gave them little choice in the matter. Nearly everyone had to learn to make do with less. Some even had to get jobs. It was a dark time indeed. After you killed her parents, Ellie left the Unreliable. She returned to her old life in the Groundbreaker's orbit, but her days of mischief and nights of carousal had lost their appeal. She found herself taking bigger and more foolish risks, but something irrevocable had changed. Life in Halcyon was sobering for Felix Millstone. The grand revolution he dreamed of never came. There was no great awakening for the colony, no celebrations in the streets. There was only the hard, desperate work of trying to repair a broken colony. Felix never had a head for numbers, but if there was labor to be done, he was there to help. Eventually, Felix realized that the work of a revolution was done with two hands. After all he'd seen and heard adventuring with you, the vicar Maximilian de Soto renounced his faith and joined the effort to rebuild the colony. Ironically, he finally found the joy that had eluded him over the course of his life, and realized that perhaps he was always meant to be just a simple laborer after all. He quickly dismissed the idea. After Junlei's murder, Parvati turned inward. She was merely quiet at first, and she wouldn't speak unless spoken to. Eventually, she stopped speaking at all. Once the matter of the Hope colonists was resolved, she slipped unobtrusively from the Unreliable during the refueling stopover. She took nothing from her berth and left no word of where she'd gone. Nyoka returned to Monarch to take another crack at making a permanent life for herself. She formed the Charon Group, a mercenary outfit of ragtag survivalists and wilderness experts. Anyone in need of a guide or just looking to throw back a beer and swap stories could find her camping on the trail or clearing an infestation. The SAM unit that accompanied you spread awareness of the product line's superior sanitation and maintenance capabilities across what was left of the colony. This led to a boost in SAM unit sales. Did you know that SAM units are the longest-lasting, toughest-acting cleaning solution in Halcyon? As for Dr. Phineas Wells, he spent his remaining years in his orbital lab. Though he was always haunted by the failures of his past, he was determined to make things right by building toward the future. Dr. Wells was able to revive many more scientists and engineers than he first expected, thanks to the additional batch of chemicals you stole from the Ministry. Wells never forgot about the human lives that were lost in acquiring these chemicals. The revival project was hard and painful work, but in the end, despite limited resources, over half the Hope's colonists were successfully revived. Even after Wells passed away, the Hope scientists and engineers worked night and day to pull Halcyon from the brink of collapse. Their efforts continue to this day, which may be reason enough for optimism. Dr. Wells laid the groundwork for the project to save the colony, but he would never live to see the fruits of his labor. He passed away a few years later. His work was carried on by the scientists and engineers he revived. Life will never be the same in Halcyon. It is widely agreed that the colony has a chance of stabilizing within a generation, owing to the hard work and determination of the surviving colonists. Recovery is a distant goal, and the path is long and uncertain. But the people of Halcyon carry on, determined as ever. And what about you, the unplanned variable in the history of Halcyon? You brought an end to the chaos in Tartarus, and left Dr. Wells to his own devices. The affairs of the colony never distracted you from living out your own dreams, to captain a ship, to sail the ether, and to earn a reputation as the greatest spacer Halcyon ever had. No one knows what's happened to Earth, and no one knows what the future has in store for Halcyon. All we know for certain is this: the name of the Unreliable and that of its intrepid captain will remain the subject of countless stories for years to come.